we're going to start with the shortbread crust. We actually need to cook that first before we can put our lemon filling on top. If you're following along with the recipe, you're going to notice that it's asking for a lot of butter and sugar. All right, our shortbread cookies are actually going to be a whole case. All right, so normally 4 sticks. Mine is coming in just a lump of butter. 4 sticks of butter, which is also 2 cups of butter, and 1 cup of white sugar, and I believe a 1/4 cup of brown sugar. Okay, now I say in the recipe light brown sugar. If you have dark brown sugar, totally fine. All right, you can interchange the two a lot of the times. I wouldn't worry about it. The only difference is how sweet it's going to be. So I'm going to take my butter, which is at room temp. It needs to be soft because we're going to cream it together with our sugar. Most of the time in a recipe, if you ever see that there's butter and sugar, you want to mix those together really well first before you add anything else. All right. You also want your ingredients to be room temperature because that's going to have them incorporate a lot more. Otherwise, it could get like chunky and not have the best feeling when you go to eat it later. So I am going to take my butter, room temperature. If you forgot to take it out of the refrigerator, you can just cut it up, put it in a microwave safe bowl, microwave it for about 30 seconds. All right, you just don't want it to be completely melted. And I'm just going to cut this up into chunks. All right, so I'm using a stand mixer here today. If you don't have a stand mixer, you can use an electric mixer. You can also do this by hand, totally fine. In my bowl already, I have my white sugar, 1 cup, and I have my 1/4 cup of light brown sugar. So I'm gonna put these in. All right, so what we're looking for is that this mixture gets nice and light and fluffy. All right, so we're waiting for this to get nice and creamy. Notice how everything is starting to come together. Now, what you're going to notice, whether you're using a stand mixer or an electric mixer, is that there's pieces at the bottom that your mixer is always going to miss. So it's always a good idea to take a minute, scrape down the sides of your mixing bowl and either your paddle or whisk attachment, just to make sure it's getting every single bit of sugar in there. That seems that good. Okay, so you'll notice how it's nice and creamy. I no longer have chunks of butter in here. I don't have any visible flour. So this is nice and creamed together. All right, I'm now gonna go ahead and add 3 3/4 cup of flour and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So let me lower this guy. And I'm just gonna do a little bit at a time. If I add too much all at once, it's gonna fly everywhere. It's not gonna get fully mixed in. It's just gonna be a big old mess. So I'm gonna put just some of it, raise this up, and let's mix it all up in there. Slow speed at first, and then I can pick the speed up. And you'll notice it's starting to clump up. It's starting to come together really nicely. All right, awesome. Let's add a little bit more. This is also a good time to mention, if you haven't started preheating your oven yet, you can preheat it to 350 degrees. Okay. All right, let's turn this on again. Awesome, and just a little bit more. All right, great. That's pretty good. All right, I'm gonna grab my my pan here. I want to spray it down with some non-stick spray, or if you have extra butter lying around, you can rub the butter down in here. I'm going to give it a nice spray. Take a paper towel and just make sure that that gets nice and coated. The next thing I'm going to do to make sure I can really easily take out my lemon bars is line my pan, my 9x13 pan, with a piece of parchment paper with an overhang. Right, so this way I can just sort of pick it up once it's completely cool, and it's going to make it really easy to slice. If you don't have parchment paper, it's not the end of the world, but it will make it easier to take out later. Right, give this a nice rip. All right, so I have my parchment paper, and it has this overhang on it. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my shortbread, I'm gonna transfer it to the pan, make sure all of the bits of flour really got in there, so making sure the bottom is scraped. Put it in my pan and press it evenly throughout the pan and push it up a little bit onto the sides. So I have my bowl. Now this looks kind of like almost like sand right now, but when I go in and use my hands in here, you'll notice it starts to clump together. Okay, so I kind of want to help it out a little bit. I'm making sure that any chunks of butter, which is giving it that moisture, is fully incorporated. So I'm just getting my hands in here and scraping the bottom. I'm now going to take my pan, transfer it over. Okay. I like a lot of shortbread. All right. And now we're going to push it in. Okay, so we want to make sure that it's nice and even. Now, if you like a cookie with less of a shortbread, I'm just a really big shortbread fan, you can use less. So if I decided that this was too much, I could take some out, cook it separately, and have just like a nice little shortbread cookie. So I have this. This is now going to go in the oven for about 20 minutes. All right, so I'm going to pop this in the oven for 20 minutes. While this is in the oven, we're going to start on our lemon filling. So I have a large bowl here with the rest of my sugar. So that's 2 cups sugar, and I have 6 tablespoons of flour. All right, so let's get our lemon juice first. Now this does take fresh lemons. We're going to be using a lot of lemon juice, so we want fresh lemons. So I have my lemons. I don't have a fancy juicer or anything, which is totally fine. I'm just going to use a fork. A little trick, if your lemons are not at room temperature, if they're cold, fresh out of the fridge, it's going to be harder to get all the juice out of it. So I recommend actually warming them up in the microwave for just like about 30 seconds, and that's going to help get that juice out. So I'm going to take my lemon, and before I cut it in half and get out the juice, I'm going to push on it, right? And this is going to help me get all the juice out of the lemon. And you can actually feel now it's softer, and it's like I've already sort of blended up the insides. Right, I'm going to take a knife, cut it in half, and then using your fork, you're just going to help get all of the juice out of that lemon, okay, as much as possible. We're looking for 1 cup, all right, which is about 7 large lemons. All right, if you get the seeds in your measuring cup, don't worry about it. We're going to pour this through a little strainer to help get the seeds out before we bake. All right, let's do this again. Ready? We're going to push, squeezing these lemons, getting as much juice out of them as possible. All right, so far I've used 1, 2, 3. This is going to be my 4th lemon, and I'm halfway there. I will say, if you have any paper cuts or anything on your hands, this would be a great time to be wearing gloves. This is my last lemon. I'm basically at a cup. I'm going to be a little bit below. That's all right. I'm just going to go for it. Okay. Perfect. So I have my strainer. I have my bowl with my 2 cups of white sugar and the 6 tablespoons of flour. I'm going to take my measuring cup, and I want to pour it through the strainer to catch any of those seeds that came out with my lemon juice. All right, we wouldn't want to cook the seeds. That wouldn't taste very good. All right, there we go. We're now going to add in 6 whole eggs into the lemon mix. Okay, so the lemon juice, the flour, and the sugar. If you don't feel comfortable cracking eggs directly into your mixture, you can put it in a separate bowl first. I'm going to put it right in. And yes, I did say 6 eggs, okay? The eggs are the binder. It's what's going to hold this whole thing together. So I'm going to take my eggs. I like just cracking it on a flat, hard surface and give a nice tap. All right, and then use your fingers to pry it apart and pour it right in your bowl. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Perfect. Now we're just going to take a whisk and we're going to whisk this all up so it becomes nice and smooth. Okay. So we want this to get nice and smooth. Really make sure you're taking the time to scrape the sides and the bottom of the bowl. We don't want chunks of flour or sugar in here. Okay, my shortbread should be ready to come out of the oven. Pretty much is. I'm going to grab it from the oven. Hold on. So I have my shortbread. You'll notice it's still a little kind of jiggly in the center, but again, I'm cooking it more, so I'm okay with that. I'm going to take a fork, and what I want to do is poke holes throughout the crust, and that is going to help the lemon filling to stick to the shortbread bottom so it doesn't separate when I go to cut it. So I'm just going to poke some holes. This isn't going to be seen, so it doesn't have to be pretty, right? You don't have to make sure it's like evenly distributed or anything. You can also, if you notice, like I'm noticing here, there's a little bit of crust that's lumping up. It's still wet right now. The butter is still malleable. It's still melted. So I can actually come through and kind of reform my crust a little bit, okay? So now I'm going to take my filling and I'm going to pour it right onto this crust. There we go. Beautiful. Awesome. Make sure it all gets in there. Great. This is going to pop right back into the oven. Same temperature, 350, and it's going to go in for about 22 to 26 minutes. All right, so I'm going to pop this in. All right, and before I pop it, I just want to show, as I'm moving it, okay, you see how it's really sliding around, it's super liquidy. I don't want any part of it to look like that when I go to take it out of the oven. So after 22 minutes, if I check on it and I see that any part is slip sliding like that, the edges will probably be set. It'll be the middle that has this darker yellow color and is really wiggling. It needs to stay in for more time. Right? Okay, so we're gonna take the lemon bars out of the oven, and you'll notice it's sort of a pale yellow, not that deep dark color we were starting with, and I touch it, it's not wiggling at all, so it's completely set and good to go. I'm going to stick this in the refrigerator for like 2 to 3 hours until it's nice and chilled. You're going to take a butter knife or an offset spatula and just run it around the edges of the lemon bars where you don't have the parchment paper, and this is just going to help take it out really easily. And then grab the overhang of the parchment paper and just lift up and put it on a clean counter to slice it up. So this is after you've chilled it. You can sprinkle it with some confectioner's sugar. I just put it in a little tea strainer, but you can just sprinkle it too if you want. And this just makes it look really nice and pretty. If you're going to save these for later, wait until you serve them to sprinkle it with the sugar. Take a clean knife and cut your lemon bars into bars. So remember, these can go in the refrigerator in a Tupperware container for about a week, and they will still be delicious. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial.